especially when you choose a topic.
Okay.
So how to handle when your client is offering stake in his product so that we can take his product seriously? How to replicate the quality?
Managing the people who are older in the company.
Lots of questions. Okay, let me first get a little bit of an assessment of the group here. So how many of you run companies that are less than 100 people, let's say? And how many between 100 and 1000? And how many more than 1000? So okay, so I get a sense of where we are. Okay. So this particular workshop, okay, I have been doing this since 2009, right? And almost 15 years now. And this was first set up for NASSCOM during 2009 when it was a feeling that, okay, we talk a lot about startups, early stage companies, but we are not helping people who are already in the business grow. So how do we get growth to happen was really the motivation for it. For the last 1 year, I'm running a 1-year program on this topic at Gokhale Institute for Politics and Economics. So we meet every month for about 6 hours. And I have a cohort of 27 companies that I'm running through for the whole year on how to scale their business. And then we did a similar session, but at a shorter one, with IIT Bombay and with the Desai Sedi School of Entrepreneurship along with NASSCOM. So we have about 25 companies in that through this network. So I have a lot of experience of talking to companies who are in a certain group trying to get to the next one. And a lot of this content has been built with another friend and colleague, a gentleman called Ashok Korwar. So Ashok is not here today, he had something else going on, otherwise we normally do these together. But for 75 minutes I said I can handle this, so that's why I'm here. So let me make sure. I'm going to skip my intro, this is already discussed. But when you put a slide deck on the thing, it's sort of useful to put that as well. So here's a theory that we tell everyone, that business growth is not linear, meaning it's not a straight line. Just because you're in business longer doesn't mean you will get to a certain size, right? But business growth happens in a sequence of S-curves. So let me explain what S-curves look like. So these shifts in orbit is something that you see at every level in the growth of the company. So at Persistent right now we are about $300 million last quarter is what we did. So roughly $1.2 billion company, 23,000 employees. And I would say we are in the 6th orbit, so to say. But this transition from the first orbit to the 2nd orbit, which is what I'm talking about today, is one of the hardest because this is where the founders need to change their mindset from being the all and every for the business to someone who brings in a team and gets a whole team to work together. So that's really what we are going to talk about. And as I was mentioning, so one of the important things to understand when you get from first orbit to 2nd orbit is that a lot of times we try to stretch the first orbit even further. We are at the top of the S-curve. We have reached the capabilities of the current business model. And we try to stretch it and we say, okay, we're going to extrapolate it at a certain level. Unfortunately, what happens when you are at the top of the S-curve is that you don't really go up, but you start to go down. And there is a very nice term that is used for that point, and that is called the point of inflection. So if you look at Andy Grove and his book, he talks a lot about this particular point of inflection where you could either go up or go down. But if you have to do something different, otherwise you are pretty much destined to keep going down. So you have to find your next S-curve. And what we are going to talk about today is, let's say you are where you are at the point, at the first blue point, and you want to get to the other one on the top. What should you do to get about it? So that's really what I'm going to discuss today. Very simple problem statement of what I want to discuss today. So I'm going to give you some ideas on what that happens. So let me ask you one other question. How many of you, let me go to the next one. So this is just some numbers here, but let me do one thing. Let me just move these chairs out. Just come in, some key resources or key individuals on your team start to leave and things like that. So every win just doesn't become automatic. It's not incrementally growing. You get to a point where you see some growth, but at the same time you see some attrition on your accounts. So there's an ongoing churn in that sense that you will see in the business. At this point, there are a lot of people, especially those who are running their own business, start to feel like, oh, this is getting too challenging. Let me go create a new business line. Yeah, whatever I had to do with this one, I have reached the max on it. I need to do something different. Now, the unfortunate part is that that may not necessarily be the right thing to do at this point. You are already short of management bandwidth and you go create another idea that may become very tricky. This is another very characteristic of the top of the curve, is that everyone becomes busy. Everyone feels that everyone is busy. All the time things are going on. Things seem very chaotic, but there is no forward progress. There is a lot of activity, but no growth. Okay? So that is something that you will see amongst a lot. And in these kinds of situations, there is a lot of gossip you will hear amongst employees, amongst each other. So there are all these stories that come around, which are just very irritating when you are running the business. And finally, you see that new hires, you go hire them. But once they come on board, they don't have anything to do. And the people who are in the business, they are so busy that they have no time to train the new people. Everything seems very busy and chaotic. So these are all signals that you see when you are at the top of the S-curve. Any of these sound familiar? Any of you have these in your business? Makes sense? And when all this happens, the founders get stressed. Okay, that's the outcome of all of this. Should we also remove those tables, or we remove those tables also? Because I'm sorry, but this screen is actually doing a startup. Your objective should be to get your first customer. Do whatever the customer tells you. So that is very simple, really. Survive. By the time you are in your second orbit, survival is not a challenge. You are doing fine. You are making whatever numbers, 20 crores or so. But it's not growing anymore. But you know that you are not just dead. You have a plan, you have a product, you have some team, you have few hundred people working for you. So that is really what is happening. Business strategy in first orbit is be responsive. Respond to whatever comes your way. In the other case, now you have to focus. In the first orbit, you have the follower team and your band of followers and maybe your dog, right? So that's pretty much how startups happen. But by the time you are at this stage, you have a few hundred people in the business. You are adding another few hundred people. So you can't just say that, okay, it's just me and whatever it feels like for me tomorrow I'll do. It's now a very professional team with executives and everything else that needs to come. And this transition for founders becomes very tricky, because one of the questions that somebody asked, how do you worry about people who are much older than you? Because now you are starting to hire professionals and executives in the company. You may be an upstart, but the team now needs people who can run the business. So how do you deal with this kind of a challenge? Governance in the early stage is very basic. Now you have to institutionalize it. Processes are ad hoc. Now you have to define them and follow them. And one last thing I'm going to share about is the board. So in the beginning, in the first orbit, you have your own founders as your board members. But now it's time to bring in independent directors. So let me ask you, how many of you run businesses where you have independent directors? One person, two people, three people. So very small number. How many of you have board meetings at least 4 times a year? So even if you are not independent, you can still have board meetings, but yeah. So this is unfortunately the reality of how things happen around. When lots of small businesses run, they run in a very ad hoc way. So what I'm going to try to share with you is how do we scale that business to a point where it starts to feel like something is happening and all. Now, this is a very famous Mario Andretti quote. He says that everything seems under control, then you are not really pushing to the hardest thing. So whatever that happens here is that a lot of times when I talk to founders, when they say, okay, I'm trying to get to the second orbit, but I'm so comfortable that I know everybody in the company, I know everything that is happening in the business, I know every transaction that is happening, I know all customers by first name. And now if I get to doubling my company or 10 times my company, I'll lose that opportunity. It will seem very chaotic. It is not really happening in the way that I should see it. But inherently, when the company grows, this is bound to happen. So if you're not seeing chaos in your company in that situation, then you're not pushing hard enough. So don't worry too much if you find that this kind of a restlessness is happening between you and your colleagues in some sense. Now, normally, I have multiple sessions, and as I said, I have many different topics in this that I can discuss. Today, I want to pick a few out of these topics, and if you come to it, we'll see if we need to do more. So I'm going to share the first one, which we call visualize to realize. I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of what I mean by that. Let's see if we feel like it. I'll do a session about positioning, theory of constraints. Maybe, how many of you are familiar with theory of constraints? Not enough people. Okay, maybe I'll give you a quick overview of that. And then we'll talk about how to build mentors and board. And I'm going to skip out on some of these other things. And I'm going to go through this relatively fast, okay, because we just have whatever time we have. And if you want to do more, then you have to come to my longer class. So here's the situation. So you have come to this class, and I tell you that you're going to grow 10 times and all that. You go back and tell your team, we're going to grow 10 times. Let's just do it. I've heard Anand talking, and I'm really excited. I'm going to go 10x my business, not double, 10x my business. What will your team say? Are you crazy? अभी क्या हो गया तुमको? अभी तक तो चल रहा था, all of a sudden कहाँ से आ गए? Where the hell are you coming from, right? We are at the top of the S curve. We have been growing 5%, 10%, 15% year on year. If I have to 10x our business, that line is so long that I'll never get to the other end of it. So how do you think it's going to happen, right? People are going to think you're crazy. It's not going to happen. And you will see so much internal resistance on this topic that कैसे करेंगे? नहीं होगा. Not possible. Everyone will come and tell you 100 different reasons why growing the business and scaling it at this point is not possible. Forget about even trying it. So you get a lot of resistance on this. So how do you get around this? So the reality is that, when people are looking at growth and you're looking at somewhere else, and it's a team effort, you need to take your team along. The team needs a mission to go after. The power of the mission is simply incredible. And one example, and this is the most famous of the mission examples, is man on the moon. So John Kennedy in 61 said that America is going to put a man on the moon before the end of the decade and bring them back. Put on the moon and bring them back before the end of the decade. So that was a huge galvanizing moment. Everybody said, I'm working for the man on the moon, for the mission of the man on the moon. So if you have a mission that is very compelling, then people can relate to that one. So trying to tell the company that, okay, I'm at certain number, I want to see 10x growth, and here's a spreadsheet, I'm going to stretch it around. People will not believe you. It will not work, right? So what you need to do is to define where you want to be, and then you have a better chance of getting to that. Now, the best example of something that I found in this topic is this article by this guy called Brian Scudmore. It's a 4-minute video. I don't want to play it right now because it will take that long. I don't have too much time, so I'm not going to play that video. But this guy is a Canadian guy from Vancouver. He runs a company called 1-800-GOT-JUNK. So it's a very, I collect junk and basically make money out of it. And they have trucks and all that, and it's a very, very traditional business. And he was running that business, competing with all kinds of things, and he sort of writes how he creates something called the painted picture of where you want to go. So here's what you have to do, okay? I'm going to skip this. So first is, you have decided that you want to scale, right? As part of when you decide to scale, you have to choose what you want to do, who is with us, and how we work together. So that's really where we want to go. So the painted picture, what you do is you define, so let me not go through these slides are there, but let me explain what you have to do. So let's say you're at a business at, let's say, I'm going to just take some random numbers, but this is true for anything. So I'm running a, let's say, a 10 crore business. And I want to grow 10x, which means I want to get to 100 crores. Now you go to your team and say, I'm running a 10 crore business, we have, let's say, 100 people. Now we want to grow to 10x, 100 crores. People are going to refuse, resist, all kinds of things. So it's very tricky for people to imagine what it takes to grow from 10 crores to 100 crores. Now, the way to do this is that instead of getting into this discussion about how to do this and what will be my next year and the next 3 years and 3-year plans. What you have to do is to get your team together and imagine what your company would look like at 100 crores. Imagine what your company looks like at 100 crores. And this is very important and very powerful. So this is your painted picture. So you say, okay, I'm running a business of 10 crores. My market is in this area. Let's say I'm working in the US or in India. I want to make it 10x. So how will the market look like? If the business is 10x, will I have 10x the number of people, or is it going to be less? How many managers would I need? How many customers would I need? What kind of situation do you think a 100 crore business might look like? Remember, I'm not asking you to figure out how to get from 10 to 100. All I'm saying is, imagine what a 100 crore business looks like. So go look at other 100 crore businesses and see how they look like. Create a story that says, this is what a 100 crore business that we have will look like. Okay, so this exercise is what we call creating the painted picture. And while you're doing, I'll just skip all these slides. There's like a lot of things here. So you have to build your painted picture, and the reason to call it picture is it's not just a document. It's not a spreadsheet. It's a poster or some story that you create that your team feels like, oh wow, this is cool, this is where we are going, right? So that is the key to defining this painted picture. This is a mirror, by the way. And the kinds of things you have in your painted picture are things like, okay, what does the business look like? Where will it be? How many customers? What kind of accomplishments may be there, and things like that. Most of these slides have links to places from where this is coming in. So if you download the deck and you go to the links, you'll be able to follow some bigger lists also. So it's worth studying. But here's what, I'm going to skip through this but tell you what we should do. So what we have done in the company as well is, so one other model of what you might see is that there's this book by on Amazon where they say they called Working Backwards. I don't know if you've read the book, it's a very nice book. What they talk about is that before they build a product, they put the PR and press release for the product. They make that while they are defining the product. So that is sort of the outcome of what the product that you are building out. And they work backwards to get to that point. So here what I would suggest is that you imagine, and you can go online and there are sites like this where you can create a business magazine. So imagine that you have reached the 100 crore. And you are on the cover of the Business Today or any magazine like that. And somebody writes an article about you and how the company has got to 100 crores. And they ask you questions and all that. So make an article like that that you can circulate to all your people in the company कि हम लोग यहाँ जा रहे हैं. This is where the world is going to be. This is our target. This is our heaven, or whatever you want to call it. Okay. So this is like the. So like this is my vision. Where do I want to go? Nice house here. So इस तरह से the other way you can do it today, which is quite nice, is imagine you're on NBC TV, CNBC, and somebody is interviewing you for 30 minutes after you have achieved this great growth. Okay, so you are going to sort of be called and say, okay, this is all you are making it up, right? So it's not like this. You don't have to call CNBC to do it. You can get your own camera and have you as the CEO, the founder, sit along with a couple of other people and have someone interview you and ask you questions. So what did you do? Why did you believe that people are going? The list of questions that I had. Ask yourselves those questions and try to answer them. And it's a really very compelling, so once you have that in, right, this is where I'm going. And everybody in the team starts to believe that that's why we are doing what we are doing. So unless you have a purpose and a mission as to where you are going, and what would the world at that point look like, it is very difficult for the team to accept that, okay, let's go do 10x growth. Okay? So this particular process of visualizing where you are trying to go is a very important step in what you need to do to get through the first step of what I'm referring to here. Okay, I'm going to take a short pause and see if you get this point, because this is actually very empowering. It's not easy to do. I don't believe you can just go home and just on the board draw it, because it takes time. And once you draw certain things, you have to make sure it is substantiated. So if you said, oh, we're going to have 1,000 people, and somebody asks you, oh, where are you going to get those 1,000 people? You should be able to answer that, in a reasonable way. So I say, nahi, yahan se aayenge. We are setting up 2 centers. It'll be in this place, that place. So all these doubts that people have, you have to sort of think through them a little bit and build out a story that is quite complete. But don't send the story as a spreadsheet to the employees. That's not very exciting to them. Create this buzz around it, create a video, create a newspaper article or a magazine article and do this. Okay, I'll take a pause, see if you have any questions. Yeah?
You said don't create new product line or something.
No, I'm not saying any of that. All I'm saying is that imagine what your business might look like at 10x.
To create a feature. Suppose you're in service.
So let's go step by step. I know you have lots of different questions. Let's focus on, do you get how to build this painted picture?
This painted picture, does it have a time lapse?
Very good question. In the beginning, when you are trying to create it, no, it doesn't have a time. You don't know when you will get there. Okay, that's the next part of where you need to come. The problem is when you start to say, I'm going to get to that in 3 years, then all of a sudden people will start to freak out. यार 3 साल में नहीं होने वाला. Okay? So it is not too important to define when that will happen. You need to have some sense of whether it is where it is. But you cannot create painted pictures that are more than 4 or 5 years out. Right? So you should have a conviction that यार 4-5 साल में हम लोग यहाँ पहुँच जाएंगे. And of course the growth will not be very linear. It will be again a S curve. So you'll see some things you will do and you'll see growth after the 2nd year and 3rd year. And you will see phenomenal growth in the 3rd and 4th year.
This printed picture is related to somewhat manifestation?
I don't know it's imagination actually. It's the aspirational vision that you're creating for your team.
So we need to include everything, like what are the kind of team we require, the managers, the infrastructure.
You should have some thought process on that, but of course in a 30-minute interview that you have with CNBC, they may not ask you those questions. But they would want you to know, your team will ask you, यार तुम बोल रहे हो ये सब, but चलेगा नहीं. See, the point is, your team at the moment, which is struggling, feeling very stressed, feels like culture is getting destroyed, all of these kinds of things, when you are at the top of the first orbit, already doesn't believe you.
So typically,
let's just finish one sentence. So it doesn't really, it's not convinced that you can do it. अरे करना था तो पहले ही कर लेते अभी क्यों क्या हो गया आपको आज, right? So there is a little bit of doubt in the people that you have. So getting the people together and saying कि this is where we are going, this is what it is going to look like, gives people a lot of confidence in the fact that it can be achieved. And one of the easy things to do is to look at other companies that have done it. I mean, you wouldn't be the first company doing 100 people or 1,000 crores or whatever number you pick, right? I'm sure you wouldn't be the first company doing it. Somebody else has done this before, right? So you can look at their numbers and see what kind of benchmarks they have, how many team members would I need, how many managers, what geographies, all that stuff. So some work has to happen. This takes about 2 to 3 months to do, okay? It's not a overnight activity. But I must tell you that this is highly empowering, not just for you, but for the entire team that works for you, all the new people that you're going to hire, and convincing your existing team members that that's where we want to go. A nice holiday like this sounds very nice to everyone. Okay? You had a question there.
Yes, sir. Like you said that we need
Yeah, go ahead, ask your question.
Yeah, like you said that we need to have a figure in our mind. So suppose we are at 50 CR, right? And I had a meeting with my team that we'll go to up to 1000 CR. But after a couple of weeks, I think we thought of a very big number. I think we should go step by step. Maybe it should be 50 to first 100, then 200, then maybe 1000. So what should be the first number that maybe it can be unreasonable or reasonable?
Okay.
Yeah.
So the point I'm trying to tell you is that the equations that you use for defining your business in the first orbit and the second orbit are different from each other. So if you try to set a target that is sort of using the same equations that you have right now, then it's not aspirational enough. So yeah, thank you. So it's not aspirational enough, and then you will not get the results you want. So you have to take a little bit of an uncomfortable target. So I would say that if you're doing 50 right now, I would at least try 250, 5x. Right? If it's just 100, so people will think कि हाँ 5 साल में 100 हो ही जाएगा, double तो 5 साल में हो ही जाएगा. But 5 साल में double होना is not very exciting. नहीं ठीक है हो जाएगा, but actually वो भी नहीं होगा. That is the reality of these things. Right? So when you try to do this in a certain way, you really don't get it there.
What is the typical number of believers that you take along?
Very good question. You need at least a dozen or at least half a dozen to a dozen. Okay, let me keep moving. We'll get another chance to ask these questions. But like I said, the first step that I'd like you to think about as you try to scale your business is to think about this painted picture of what your second orbit or your next orbit looks like. And it's important to do it this way rather than trying to extrapolate from where you are at the top of the S to somewhere else. So this is the first point. Now let me get to the second thing. Since I saw that many of you have not figured out this theory of constraints, I find that theory of constraints is a very nice strategy framework that is simple to use for small businesses, and it works quite well. It's very easy to figure out. All the other ones are too complicated. Balance scorecard, all these there are like a lot of them, but they are all very complicated and don't get to the point. So this one is being done by Eliyahu Goldratt, and there is a lot of books on this topic. The most famous book on this is a book called The Goal, G-O-A-L, Goal. Okay, and the concept is simply like this. So if you see this tree, right, and you have a Ferrari, how fast will you go?
As fast as this last.
As fast as the slowest guy on this thing. That's bicycle rickshaw crossing it is determining the speed of your transport. Right? So in any system, according to Goldratt, there is one constraint that is holding you back. And if you can identify that one constraint that is holding you back, identify and then resolve it, then you automatically get off that constraint and you see growth for something. So that's really what Goldratt says. Now, of course, it's a fairly, he has weeks of courses he does on this topic. I'm going to give you a 10-minute version of this Goldratt thing, but this is really what essence of what he's saying. So, again, same concept. The weakest link in the chain determines the strength of the chain. So if you can find out what is the weakest link, then you can fix that weakest link and get that going. So many businesses that are at this stage, which are growing at, say 10 crores, trying to get to 100 crores, there are a few things. There's one thing that's kind of holding the company back. So if you can identify what that one thing is, then to that extent, it's much easier to grow the business. So that's really what you're looking at. The same thing in another way is that every system has one constraint, one bottleneck that is holding things back. Now, the key is to find out what is the constraint that is holding you back, right? So how do you find your constraint? So, what is the constraint? That depends on the business model that you're running, what exactly your business is. But typically, if you're running a business for the last 5, 7, 10 years, you're running already, you will have a good sense on what the constraint already is. You might come back with 4 or 5 constraints, but then the idea of Goldratt is to find one constraint. So 2 ways to do this. One is to do a thought experiment that says that, okay, if I'm where I am, I want to get to 50 crores. What is that one thing that is holding me back? Or if I could get that right, automatically I should see some growth. So it could be, okay, I feel I don't have good sales. Okay? That could be a constraint. Oh, I don't have enough money, or I don't have a product, I don't have something to sell. So something as simple as that could be your constraint. So identifying that constraint is a good particular thing. The whole point of constraint is the constraint is also a lever. So if I know what is holding back, then I have a way of getting past it. Now there are various kinds of constraints. So first one is an external constraint. So what is an external constraint is something that the market determines. So for example, if I am Google and I have 90% market share in search, for me to increase my market share is kind of not that easy, right? So it's somebody who has an external thing that says, no, I cannot grow my business because there is no market for what I do. Most likely those of us in this room don't have that constraint, okay? There could be some other external thing that happens, that government regulation comes and your business shuts down or anything else like that. So these are things that are not in your control, these are external control or external constraints. Now, if they are not external, then they are internal. So, internal are within you. So, you have a chance of fixing them. External constraints you can't fix. So, in a way, if you have an internal constraint, then it's good. If you can find out your internal constraint, you can shake it and get going. Right? So, that's a good thing to do. Now, if you look at this example here, which is a bonsai there, bonsai is an internal constraint. That tree could have grown, but I chose not to let it grow because I cut its roots every time. So that's an example of an internal constraint. Right? Now within the internal constraint, and this was Mukhyamantri ji also said this. I didn't do this after he said it. He said the same thing. You have that elephant and there's a small rope, and he doesn't go away because his mindset constrained there. He doesn't think he can do it. He doesn't know he is strong enough. So that is exactly what the CM talked about today, that mindset constraint is one of the big constraints. And one other story on this is like, oh, I'm not Shah Jahan, so how could I build the Taj Mahal? So this is not possible because I'm so and so. And Ashok says it in a way that he says, oh, I'm a Marathi guy, how can I be running a business? His wife is Gujarati, so she said, what do you mean by that, right? Everybody runs business in Gujarat. Who are you to say that can't be done? So everyone has these various kinds of constraints that we have. Policy constraint is another big kind of constraint. So you know who this is. This is Bhishma Pitama. And if you look through the Mahabharata, he had created so many constraints for himself, okay, that there was no reason for Mahabharata if Bhishma had become the king and he was the most powerful and he would have just pretty much run, everyone would have worked with him and he would have been the ruler in this thing, in Hastinapur, and we would not have had any Mahabharata. He decided, no, I'm going to not IIT, or I'll not hire from IIT. I'll only hire people who are this thing. Every project must have so much margins. I cannot pay more than this person. I get paid so much, so I cannot hire a sales guy who I pay more than I pay myself. So all these other constraints that we create, which are all over the place in companies. And these are constraints that hold you back. So understanding what is holding you back is a good part of what you need to do. One other constraint is, which is very common, is to keep people busy all the time. If you keep people busy, then they are not polishing their resume. Okay, that's the whole reason. Keep them busy. But they may be doing work which is kind of not relevant. They may be doing work that is making other people do more work just in the sake of keeping busy, right? So you might as well tell them, just stay out, let me finish all this stuff, then you come back to it. So there are a lot of these constraints that we have all across in our businesses. Now, if I find the constraint, then what do I do, right? Once I find the constraint, then constraint is a lever, so then I can go back and then fix the constraint. So Goldratt gives this 5 principles on how to address constraints. First thing you do is you identify the constraint. The second thing is you do is to squeeze the most out of the constraint. So if you find that sales is your constraint, then make everybody in the company become a sales guy. So send everyone to sales, right? Because you already have those people. Why do you want to go higher? Test it out, ki chalta hai ki nahi? If more people can do sales, sales badega ki nahi badega? So the example that Goldratt gives in the book Goal is the following. See, he's into scouts and he's taking a bunch of kids from age 8 to 16 on a trek in a hot day with a bunch of backpacks. And the important thing is that the batch of 20 needs to all go together because otherwise it will be very tricky for him. So he realizes that the smaller kids have bigger bags and are slowing things down, and the big kids are going very fast and they are very restless. So what should you do? So what he did was he took the bags out of those small kids and gave it to the big boys. So slowed them down so that the younger kids moved a little bit faster and the whole system moved faster. So it is not always necessary to get the fastest car on the road. Okay, it's not necessary to just be fast everywhere. There are certain cases when slowing the system down might give you better throughput. So that's what he talks about. And then finally you elevate the capability of the constraint, and you, once you are done with this, you take a break and say, okay, what again next? Okay? So this is a very quick, short overview of theory of constraint. Okay? Let's take a short pause here and take a question or two. How many minutes are we in the system now? How much do we have?
You have another 5 minutes.
5 minutes?
The masterclass.
45 minutes.
75 minutes.
When did we, how much minutes have we come? So
45 minutes, sir.
we have done 45?
Yes.
30 minutes. You've done 30 minutes.
Sir, people want more time. So don't worry, sir. You carry on, sir. You carry on.
Let me suggest one thing.
So people are enjoying it too much, they will be here for as long as you are ready to speak.
This is really warm right now here in the room. So let me suggest that, let's just stand up a bit, stretch a little bit, and then try again. We'll go to the next section while you collect the questions. So please, can you all just rise up and put your hands up, stretch a little bit. It's a very warm room. I think some water would also help. Can we circulate some water to make the air to fill up? All right. I know it's very hard to be sitting in a warm room. Okay. Came in for the show. So he had come in and he said this, which was very interesting. He said, I'm the best magician at my price point. The leadership. Because Las Vegas, you can pay any amount for a magician. But this is what you want to pay, then I'm the best guy for that price point. So essentially what this is all about is that even if I'm a 10 crore company, I should be able to define my business in such a way that I can be a leader. And to be a leader in the market, I need the market to be no bigger than a certain size. Because then I know what the market is, I know what the leadership is, and I know what it is. Unfortunately, the whole VC and all the funding community gets a little crazy about, oh, you need to have $1 billion market size. If you have $1 billion market, I'm a 10 crore company, nobody is going to come to me, nobody will know me. How do I build a market when I'm looking at a market that is so large? So how large a market do you want to look at? You want to look at a market that is at least 5 times your aspirational size, but not too much more than that. Okay? And the reason this is important is, on the other hand, now if you already have 50% market share, right? I'm already a leader in that market, then I have no room for growth. So that is the reason for suggesting 20% and not 50%. You don't want to be in a situation where you have no room for growth. Now, if you already at 50%, then you have to find a bigger market or look for adjacencies or anything else that might be. So I'm going to share with you a persistent story in 2001. Okay, 2001, we were about this size, 10, 15 crores, whatever. And this was just after Y2K. Y2K had ended, .com burst had happened. So all of a sudden, Y2K ke baad, everyone started to talk about outsourcing and IT outsourcing. India really got a thrill that we were able to get a lot of things happening in Y2K. And there was a belief that Y2K ke baad IT will be dead, but reality what happened is people were able to get confidence and more IT happened after Y2K. So everybody was starting to sell now into every space. It was all over the place. I was running a very small business. I said, yeah, if I have to compete with the TCSs and Satyams, who were already much larger than we were, and try to say we are also IT outsourcing, then so nobody will come to us. Why would anybody work with me? So we decided that instead of calling ourselves IT, we defined product outsourcing. So we created a category around product outsourcing. We said, okay, we are not IT outsourcing, we are product outsourcing. Now you say, what is the difference? So we created a definition for it, that if you have IT project, you have fixed requirements, you do trade-off between time and money. When you have a product, the first thing you decide is when you want to ship the product. Then you decide how much you want to spend, and you build the best possible product within the time and money. Now, if you do this kind of a differentiation and you go to a product company and you say, okay, I'm doing this stuff, and they kind of relate to you, they get it. They say, yeah, fine, this is exactly what we do. You can ask them, so how many people are you hiring from IT types? No, we don't hire from IT. We hire from product companies. There's a whole ecosystem around that. So you can really create a differentiated positioning in that category. Now, very interestingly, what happens is, if I say I'm a pure play product outsourcing company, right? TCS, HCL and all Wipro were doing a lot more product outsourcing than we were doing, even at that point. But they would never want to say that they are pure play product outsourcing companies, because they had such a big market in IT that if they started to call themselves that I'm in a niche player, then automatically they would feel like they're going to lose out on the big market. So by constraining the market but by defining leadership, we were able to get to some good returns because of that particular positioning that we did. Okay? I'll give you a few more examples. This is from, Ashok was consulting with Polaris. So Polaris, again, same thing, they were doing all kinds of random things, and by 2000 they realized, let's just focus on banking. And after they did that, they saw phenomenal growth in their business. I'm going to give you 2 or 3 other examples.
Does that mean some kind of specialization?
Yeah, I'll give you 2 examples first, and then I'll answer some more. Just give me one. Let me give you 2 more examples, because this is an interesting concept and it takes a little thinking to figure this out. So I'm going to give you a story from one of the Pune TiE classes that I did. So there was a guy who was doing travel agency business. And travel agency is pretty much not a commoditized business. You're competing with not only other travel agencies, but you're also competing with Make My Trip and Yatra, and margins are fine and you're not making much money. But he was running a business and he attended the class, and I said, no, you have to have a leadership, do something else. So he looked at his portfolio of things and he found that he had one deal where he had worked with a US university that was doing travel to India programs, travel agency. He said, yeah, this is a good thing. He created a whole package around that. Okay, I am the person you should come to for India travel for study abroad programs. So now, instead of his market being every customer on the street who travels, now he's selling to maybe 1,000 universities in the US that have an India abroad program, India study abroad program. Only 1,000 people, but he knows who those are. And for each one of them, he's providing them this full service that you give me the deal, I will make your travel booking, I'll make sure your hotels are there, I'll make sure you have the guides, you can decide whether you want to do North India, South India, Jaipur, Sarnath, some study tour, whatever. He created those packages and he offered to them. Now, if I go to a US guy sitting in the US and tell him I'm going to give you this full service, and very easily you can create the FUD, right? कि अगर तुम खुद करोगे तो कहीं भी फंस जाओगे. इंडिया मालूम है आपको? नहीं यार, ठीक है आपके साथ. Your margins completely change, right? Very different kind of business. Again, a consumer business. B2B, yes, B2B, B2C. But the idea is to get a good sense of what your customer looks like. If I know who I'm selling to, then my package looks much better and much cleaner. Just trying to say I'll do anything for anybody is like not differentiated. So differentiation and leadership are the 2 key things that I'm trying to suggest to you. I'll give you one more example. So this was a Delhi TiECON class. There was a guy who came in and said, I do open source software. I said, your open source is too big. Thoda usko specialize karo. So he said, okay, Drupal. He was working in Drupal. I said, okay, Drupal is good. Focus on Drupal. So he said, okay, if you are doing open source and open source related things, then you have to go after the Drupal community. So you have to build stuff in that. You have to answer questions in the Drupal community. It's a much tighter community. If somebody wants to go find a Drupal guy, first thing they will do is they'll go to bulletin boards and see who's the committers, who are the guys who are making answers and who are writing code into the open source stuff. So if you have some of those, then people come to you. So establishing a brand becomes so much easier when you know what you are doing, and when you are in a niche or in a differentiated market as a differentiated player. It's much easier. And it's much easier to compete against the very big boys, because you are one of, Drupal, and everybody says we do Drupal. But there are only few people who commit code to Drupal. Right? So you go to somebody and say, yeah, You go to them when that shit happens from Wipro doing it, you'll come back to me because I'm the one who knows how to do it. So as a small business, having very differentiated position actually helps a lot. This is, of course, I'm coming from Pune, so in Pune, Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj is the key thing. So his game plan was, he did not go fight the Mughals in the plains. He got them in his turf, right? I am not going to go fight him everywhere. He is bringing elephants, you come to my ghats and I will take care of you. But the whole strategy was to create that differentiation and create that leadership. In my world, you are not going to mess with me. These are some interesting examples of what you might look like. So, there are all kinds of examples. Some of these are all things. If you want to read one book about this, which is very nice, you should read the Mariko book. And this is a book called Harsh Reality. Okay? It's written by Harsh Mariwala about how he kind of fended off Unilever and Hindustan Unilever in the oil business. He is the parachute king. Nariyal Tel. And he writes a very nice book here, Making of Mariko, worth reading. And he explains very nicely how he could compete against the very big brand of Unilever. All the money, all the people, MBAs, whatever else. But it was just him, because he said, I knew the market really well. I knew every buyer in the market. So this is another example of how you want to look at this. One more example I'll share, which is a consumer example, and I'll come back to this in a moment. Yeah, this is again an interesting information. If you looked at Amazon.com or even Facebook or Apple, they all started with a very specific product, and then they added more to it. First, apples were made and targeted for the designers, meaning desktop publishing kinds of people. Mera fonts acha hai, I can print phenomenal returns, the artists and all that stuff. That's how the Macintosh made it. The Facebook was Harvard students looking at girls. That's how it started. Right? So you have to find your niche. These are some Indian brands I have found, which are all like this. So they have all created fairly big brands, but they started out as very specialized, but leadership in that market. They are not just one-off brands. Okay? When you look at First Cry for that matter, it's not just that, yeah, you can buy children's clothes on Amazon, no doubt about it. But the leadership in terms of where you are trying to go for those kinds of things is being established by these sort of unique businesses. The paperboat model is the most interesting one actually. If you think about how paperboat made it, right? You're competing against the big boys, right? Pepsi and Coke. And they're selling this black liquid or white liquid, whatever else. But then these guys said, okay, if I just say I have another cola drink, who the hell is going to buy from me? Nobody's going to buy. I have to make it different. So they packaged it different. They created flavors that were different. If you looked at their first marketing strategy, they did not go to distributors and dealers or individuals. They were using Indigo Airlines as their first market. So sales point was one. Go convince Indigo. Indigo was convinced they were pushing paperboat on planes. All of a sudden everybody says, no, I like it. I want to get it somewhere else, right? So again, it was a differentiated strategy to get started. I'm creating a niche for myself. I'm targeting a market segment that I know what I'm targeting. It's not infinite or millions or whatever else. It is very, very specific. If I know what my market is, then my story aligns to that. Who travels by airlines? Yes, these are the kinds of people. If you read the story, at least in the older paperboat thing, I try to bring you memories of your kids. So they are looking at people who were in their 40s to 60s, not the 20-year-olds. Nimbu Pani, putting paperboards. This is like people in the 60s, 50-year-olds, those from the 70s, the kids from the 70s would remember those things. So they had that in their mind, right? So it was targeted to a certain thing. Now, of course, paperboard sells all kinds of products in all kinds of grocery stores. But they didn't start from there. Let's skip through this. So this is the summary. It also helps to catch a wave. And I want to end this section with this very interesting slide, which I like to share with all the people because in India, everybody gets it. So you know what this is? It's a bhais. buffaloes. You understand? You know, imagine the market to be buffaloes, bhais hai sab char. And you are that fly hanging around on that buffalo. So just imagine, chodi company hai, you get sorted off anytime. Your strategy is to find that buffalo which is going in the right direction and go with it. Your strategy is not to create a market. 10 crore company cannot create a new market. It's too much expense. So you have to ride a wave. You have to see kahan bhais ja rahi hai and iske saath main nikal jaऊँ. Once you get big enough, then you eat the buffalo. But in the beginning, at a 10 crore company, 20 crore company, you're too small to be saying, I'm going to define a new market. Okay? Cost of creating markets is very high. So you have to constrain the market. Decide, ये मेरा story है, यहाँ मैं leader हूँ. And leadership is the key. Leadership gives you premium value, premium things, and it creates the excitement. And it's so much fun to get the tailwind with you. Ki business is coming because people come to you for business. You're not chasing people to get business to you. This is very, very important. Okay, this is the. If you want to take one lesson back from today's thing, I would say this is what I would say is the lesson. I'm going to take a short pause to see if you have any questions, and we'll take a time check, and then we'll do one more or no more, depending on what happens. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the lovely session. My question is on the leadership part. Isn't that the orbit one story?
Which one? No.
The leadership part.
No, first orbit story is do what customer tells you to do. So there's no leadership.
Right.
I'm responding.
Right.
So I'm just starting out. I don't know what works. I don't know where I am. I don't know what I should be a leader in. I don't know. I have no idea. And I have some ideas, but I have not tested them out. By the time you are in the second orbit, you would have tested them out. You would have tried something. Some customer is happy with your work.
Right.
Okay. So it is not a first orbit. First orbit, you don't establish leadership. First orbit, you respond.
Right.
Second orbit, you know what you are doing. Now you build establish leadership.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
When you showed your slide, right, you talked about differentiation. Basically, the point which refers here is, which we call it as USP, which is unique selling proposition.
Yeah.
Right. So when you have a client, right, why would the client give the business to TCS, Infosys, Persistent? Why? Because it's only your USP. When the competition increases, if you have your USP, then only you can sell it. When you talked about Persistent, creating a product development model, right, it was only what you created as a USP.
No, I agree with USP, but USP does not translate to leadership. See, point is, yes, you have a unique product, no question about it, but that doesn't establish you as a leader. See, I didn't give you all the details in this, but after defining that we were a product company, we looked at the market, it was still quite large. So we said, okay, we are going to focus on product companies that are in the data layer, okay, of the product development market. Because at that point I could see that, yeah, I can be a leader in that market. Leadership is the important thing. USP becomes part of it. USP on its own doesn't give you leadership.
No, but you become a leader when you have a USP. Otherwise, you don't become a leader. TCS became the leader because they have a USP. Infosys became the
What is their USP is very hard to determine in a way. But the point is, leadership is important because when a buyer makes a decision to buy a product, they look at Gartner, ये वो वहाँ leader का नाम दिखता है, right? They will go and ask you, if you are a small company that comes and say, who will compete with you? They'll ask you. Now, if a TCS goes and says, Persistent competes with me, they'll call me immediately. अरे तुम्हारा नाम तो सुना ही नहीं था, इन्होंने आपका नाम बोल दिया, कुछ तो करते हो क्या, right? So USP is fine. I'm not saying don't do USP, but I'm saying is USP is not the only thing. Leadership is the more important. And the other thing is, a lot of people come and say कि यार हम लोग ये करेंगे तो बाकी चीज़ नहीं होगा, हम लोग बहुत सारी चीज़ कर रहे हैं. So there I tell them कि देखो, if you have to catch a rabbit and you have two of them, what do? You catch one first and then you catch the other one. You can't catch both at the same time. तो सबके पीछे आप भागोगे तो कहीं भी नहीं जाओगे. अगर टारगेट कहाँ जाना है, पूरे जोर से go after it, वो पकड़ लो एक, फिर दूसरा पकड़. That's what this is about. And this is again targeted to the small size of companies. I'm not talking to a GE or a Tata, whatever. Unka strategy alag hai. We are talking about the second orbit business.
What to do if you're in the middle?
Which one?
What to do if you're in the middle of
Middle
catching two
meaning?
rabbits? I mean, there are two rabbits in the front. You're somewhere in the middle.
You have to choose one. Na? You have to decide which one to go after. Take a call. It's like the goalkeeper, right? Ball kahin se bhi aa rahi. You have to take a call. Idhar jana. You can't go both places. It's a chance a little bit. You might miss a few.
But you're invested in both. That's the
Nahi
problem.
kar sakte ho, no? You can't catch both anyway. Anyway, let's not argue on this. I have very little time. On another day, I would argue with you. I want to cover one more very important thing. Okay? And I'm going to then decide if you want to do anything else. So, entrepreneurship can be very lonely. You need a team to climb the mountain. Clearly. But you need a mountain to climb before you have the team to climb the mountain. If you don't have a mountain, then you can't climb the team. Then the team doesn't know where to go. So showing the mountain is the important thing that we started in a painted picture. I think this comes in again. I recommend this particular book called Beyond the Summit. It's about mountaineering. But I'm going to not go too much. I have a set of slides which I have hidden here. I'm going to go to this particular second most important thing that I think is very important for businesses at this stage. So the reality is that when you are running your own business, it's your business. You are the center of the business. Whether you like it or not, everybody is looking to you and everybody is working for you. By the time you get to the second orbit, you need to transform that business from being my business to our business. I'll tell you where this happened for me. It took me 1 hour to make this, 1 year to make this transition. So this is from 97, 98. Okay? We are a very small company, 25, 30 people. And we were doing very cool things. We were very profitable, all of that. And then, we would say no to work because, hey, और झंझट है, काम आएगा तो और परेशानी होगी. अच्छा चल रहा है, 4 customers है, let's be happy, let's not find a new one. So that was the situation that we were in. All of a sudden, one of the guys in the room when we were having an offsite said, यार ये तो आप अपनी सोच रहे हो, हमारा क्या होगा, हमारी growth कहाँ से आएगी? ये अच्छी point है, it's correct. The way we are doing it, we are deciding where to grow the business or not grow the business. You may or may not be what I'm thinking about right now. So we have to ask this question कि ये company किसकी है? मेरी company है, आपकी company, हमारी company, right? So that is a very important question, and it takes a lot of work for the founder to get that right. And I have come to the conclusion that businesses don't grow from one level to the next level because the founder is not willing to make it our company and it's always my company. And this reflects into the culture as to why people would want to work with you. And everything that happens about team building kind of gets anchored on this particular point, whether it's my company or our company. Right? Now I'm going to show you the architecture of what happens. Okay, so this is some company, let's say, some AK software. The idea is the founder employs all these people work for the founder owns the company, founder has a mission. And this is very real, okay? I asked these questions to, so I had a group I met. I do these very frequently, just talking to founders and businesses. So one of them said, we want you to come and talk about team building. I said, okay, fine. Can you give me a set of questions that you would like me to answer? So the questions were, how can I get the team to align with my mission? How do I get the team to work for this, that and other things? So it's like, मेरा mission है, मेरी company का mission है, आप लोगों का सबका mission है, right? Nobody is working for your mission. People are working for our mission. That's the huge difference, right? So you need to move from an architecture that looks like this. So there is a company. All the people are employed by a company. They are not working for you, they are working for a company. And you are also working for the company. You may have an ownership which has a board and all that. And the mission belongs to the company, not to you, right? This transition took me a year. And when you make this transition, I'll tell you what changed for me. And I'll give you my story and then we can take questions. So one is, when this transition happened, right? Before that so I'm a programmer by training. So I'm a coder, I like coding, okay? So I was writing code that we were shipping. And when the CEO writes code, everybody says, कि यार उसका code है, उसी को fix करना. So all my time I was doing coding in the night and then मैं किसी को call कर रहा है, very busy, crazy life. And then we decided that okay, it's our company and the company needs to grow and all that. We didn't have enough sales guys in the company. So everybody said, I also realized that biggest constraint is sales. So if sales is a constraint and I want to be the CEO of the business, then I should focus on sales. So I said, okay, I should become the sales guy. The best decision I would have made. I recommend that everyone should be a salesperson. So that's what I did, and really it helped the company in many ways. I stopped coding, not because I was okay, I was good, but there were other people who could do it. For selling, there wasn't anybody else to do it. So the question that happens when you are the CEO of the business or when you're running owner or whatever, and you separate ownership from management, the idea here is you are the CEO of the company as long as you are the best person to be the CEO of that company. The company needs to have a growth whether or not you like it. Your growth is different. You as the CEO's job is to make sure that the company grows. Otherwise, you are not fit to be CEO. That choice is yours. That is not taking you away from the fact that you are the owner of the company. Ownership and management are two different things. To run online. But we are doing more frequently these sessions at IIT Bombay and other places. Right? 2-day, 3-day sessions. About 2 to 6, 2 to 8, 6 hours. But there is so much content, I can tell you, that this is a very interesting problem. And I'm trying to see how to build a community so that everyone can help each other to make this growth happen. The reality is that everyone has the same set of challenges. You know, when you talk about growth, everyone feels Mera is a unique and alag business. The group that I have has people from all kinds of industries. And the problems are very similar. We can really help each other by showing them here, this is what I'm doing, what are you doing, and all that. So, but what you do for a startup is different from what you do at this stage. That is the main difference, right? So at every stage, what you do is different. So I'm only focused on this second orbit transition. Yeah, I know it's a little late. Let me know.
Thank you very much, sir. I request you to stay back for a moment and to felicitate Dr. Deshpande with a small token of appreciation. I would like to invite Puneet Verma, CEO and founder, Sidebrain Technology.
So just want to share, I attended his Masterclass in Pune 1.5 years back. So I've been after him since then that come to Chandigarh and conduct a class, and I believe you all are happy with it.
Please sit on, we have another session to go.
Great impact on me. Thank you.